Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship Podcast. I'm Jodi Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. This is going to be part 2 of my conversation with Luke and Lauren Smallcomb. So if you missed part 1, be sure and go back and listen to that. We had such a great conversation that I had to break it into 2 episodes. So here's part 2. As you guys evolved in your marriage, I mean, it was rough going with not only neurodiversity that you weren't aware of, but there were attachment difficulties, some trauma histories there. Probably trauma along the way that was reinforced by your relationship or the way you both handled external things that happen, because life happens, I mean,
all the above.
Yeah. So what would you like to share with people? What's coming to mind?
I didn't know I had ADHD until about 5 years ago. And so looking back, I was an ADHD burnout, shut down. And I wish we just had that language so that Lauren could tell me her attachment was being activated. And I could have language of, this is nothing personal. My brain is just overwhelmed and shutting down. And the overfunctioning that she had to do, and like you said, we find each other. I think we had an early marriage counselor that told me that she was the overfunctioner. They didn't use that language, but like the cat and mouse idea.
Mm-hmm.
Any conflict we had, she always resolved it. And so he gave me the advice that that's no longer her job. I need to pursue her. And that was really helpful. Even looking back at it now as it being neurodivergent, I think I needed that concreteness of something for me to focus on rather than there's a lot going on. I don't know what to fix, what to focus on. For him just to say, focus on this, I think really helped my ADHD brain. And so there's that combination of, I had to take a risk and learn new skills, but she also had a lot of compassion. A lot of times I would be like, hey, you're being a jerk and I'm really mad at you and we need to talk. And she said, okay, you're trying. let's talk. It wasn't that bad, but my RSD would be activated, my attachment would be activated, and I wouldn't come with this gentleness or with all my thoughts organized. And again, now I know that as neurodivergent, my thoughts are organized. I am a verbal processor. It takes me some time to get things out. But just that, I think one reason why we made it is we are really good friends. We've always been we were friends before we were dating. And we always had that understanding that we are good people and we love each other. Even when we were triggered, my brain always didn't hold on to that, but we always could get around to it. I think something that's helped is communication. And again, this is probably where Lauren overfunctioned because I was not good at communicating. Even if I initiated it or tried and it was a disaster, she would always bring us back together. And now I understand it as part of it is avoidance, but also part of it is object permanence. If I went to work, I didn't worry about the fight that we just had last night.
You didn't think about me.
It was out of sight, out of mind. Yep.
I had enough on my plate and my mind to focus on. And she's like, are we going to talk about this? I'm like, talk about what? She's like, the fight that we had last night. Oh, yeah.
I believe it. Every hour of that day, I'm over here in my anxious attachment, dying inside.
Oh, gosh, anxious attachment. I can relate. I definitely had that attachment style. I think I've actually healed that part of me And of course, you can have a different attachment style in different relationships, depending on the safety of those relationships. I've likened it to like a drug addiction. One of the things that I learned to recognize in myself when I was having attachment issues is if I felt like I was having a drug craving, that need to reattach. I've never had an actual substance addiction in myself, but it felt like what I imagine it's like, this just absolute compulsion to try to get my drug, which is reconnecting and resolving the disconnect in some way. And then you've got that paired with an avoidant attachment of my nervous system is completely overwhelmed and activated because you're coming after me so hard and heavy. So I'm pulling away from you even more. And that's such a common dynamic in neurodiverse relationships, because you oftentimes have someone who has that avoidant mixed with someone who's got the anxious, which of course those two find each other anyway, whether it's neurodiverse or not. So over the course of time, the two of you had this, what we see in neurodiverse relationships, this growing chasm that was between two people who are friends, who genuinely care about each other, love each other, respect each other, have high regard for each other, but this gap is growing. What would you say was like the turning point? For some people, it's different. Some people it's slow. Some people it's like a moment in time. Can you identify it, or do you even know?
It was definitely slow. It was, very slow. Of really helping us heal our attachment together was a big thing. And it's interesting, like, I wish our language of neurodivergence came in earlier, because it would have saved us so much, but that's only been in the last like 4 years. So there was a lot of stuff that had to happen before that, of like attachment, but also there was some understanding of personality differences about 6 to 7 years ago. Just understand what we now would say are very neurodivergent characteristics, but Lauren saw these and was like, oh my gosh, I understand you. And in that context, I also could say, okay, I'm not broken. This is just a personality. Because there was so much shame of who I was, not just in our relationship, but just in general. But we also grew up in a high control religion. So there's just shame upon shame of I was broken, I was bad, I didn't fit. And then Lauren is this extroverted, high motivated, very efficient, productive person. And I am this lazy person, is kind of how I said it. Like, I can't keep up with her because I work and I'm tired. She works and she can see people, she can interact, she wants to engage. And I'm just like, I must be lazy. So one day, maybe I can heal enough to be not lazy. And the personality showed that I have low energy. And Lauren's like, oh, this makes much sense. And I was like, oh, I'm not broken, I'm not lazy, I can just be low energy. And so that really helped just have some language.
You should share what it was, because some people might know about it.
Yeah, the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So I'm a 9 and she's an 8. So like from that perspective, she's high energy, I'm low energy. It's like and again, 8s and 9s, they shouldn't be in relationship with each other.
Well, unquote.
Quote, shouldn't, yeah.
But I would have challenged that, because my perspective on that is that it makes you more of a power couple, honestly. Because if you had two high energy people, I think it would. Can you imagine the chaos? But also, if you had two low energy people, then there's also another kind of chaos, which is just total, just nothing gets done. Whereas two high energy people, too many things are, too many irons in the fire. Yeah. And I think that having that balance actually is such a strength, where one of you slows things down a bit and the other one keeps things moving. So, but it's learning to embrace those differences and being respectful of the other without judgment. And that's, I think, when things like these personality tests, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, which is now 16 personalities, there's a bunch of different ones online that you can look at. It really takes some of that shame and judgment out of it. Like you were saying, Luke, when we look at it and go, oh, there's a lot of other people who are enough like me that there's a category that describes us, and it's not pathological. It's not an illness. It's not something wrong. It's just our operating system. I use that analogy all the time about neurodiversity, whereas we have operating systems and then we have different software on our operating system, which makes our whole system function differently, and one is different from the next. And so it's like if you had two laptops, one might be really, really great at running these programs, and the other one might be really great at these programs, but would crash if it tried to run a program on that one. But we all contribute in such a positive way to society and even in relationships. I want to back up too to something that we're talking in this podcast season about the ingredients that need to be there for couples to make it work. Not every neurodiverse couple is going to make it, but a lot will, even like you said, with such major differences. And one of the main ingredients that I'm seeing in the two of you is at some point, even though you were in what I call the boxing ring for a while, where you kind of saw each other as the opponent, both of you were willing to stop and do some introspecting and looking at yourselves and going, okay, what is happening here? Can you describe a little bit for folks what that was like, especially when you're in a place of kind of feeling like you have to defend yourselves, or for you especially, Luke, like you're having to defend yourself, and then Lauren, not so much what I'm hearing is defending yourself, but more feeling like you have to go get that reassurance, like almost like pursuing Luke's love and not knowing if it's there because he seems to be kind of shutting it down. What's that like to be able to stop and look at yourselves?
I'm thinking, two of the biggest shifts for me were learning how to not overfunction and to have a balanced level of responsibility for my people, my kids, my partner. And that was, very connected to an anxious attachment style because of the role that I had played in my family of origin. So it was like multiple things happened in our personal lives where kind of the Jenga tower came tumbling down. Mm-hmm. And I was faced with the reality that I cannot save anyone. I can only save me. And Mary Oliver has an amazing poem about that. Like, you are the one that you're here to save on this earth, no one else. And for me, I had to embrace that at such a deep level. And it was almost like dying because that had become my identity so deeply, to help my people. And then maybe that is why I was drawn to someone so different than me, and to someone who was undiagnosed neurodivergent, didn't feel confident in the world, didn't feel capable or competent, even though he was, but he didn't feel it. And it was like, I came in like, oh, I will help you. I will give you that. And it really was that magnetic pull we had to each other, which I completely, like, that's our paradigm too, Jodi. We are constantly seeking to balance out these polarizations in the world, in our relationships, everywhere. And we do it through finding people really different. And it can be the worst disaster or eventually like the most powerful transformation, right? And for us, I had to stop trying to fill in all the gaps and make everything okay. I also have 3 neurodivergent kids. So there was just a lot of overfunctioning that I was doing, and in our relationship, this dynamic we had gotten into. And thankfully, before I started pulling away from that, we developed a more secure attachment. So that really gave us more security and safety to feel like, okay, we can redefine our roles. Mm-hmm. This overfunctioning bit we were stuck in. I reminded you about that thing. This is the last time I want to remind you about it. So can you make sure that you remember however you need to? Because I'm not going to bring it up again. In the past, that would have maybe pissed him off because it's like, wow, she's so, whatever, fill in the blank, because of how that might have felt. But now he can see, oh, she's trying to not overfunction. She's trying to be balanced and take care of herself and be a supportive partner, but not be an overly supportive partner. And because we developed more security, which how we did that, honestly, you had asked, was there a time? And there was, I think you didn't think of it when you asked that question. We were in a very traumatic situation with a kiddo, one of our adoptees. And it was years of trauma inside of our home. We just were in that situation, and it kind of made all the petty crap that we fought about go to the wayside.
Yeah.
It really depend on each other to help each other feel safe, because we had such little safety. So we found solace in each other. And in that really difficult environment, we actually became so much more securely attached individually and to each other, which is weird, right? Like, who would have thought? But it's the perspective shift we needed to let go of stuff that really didn't matter and recognize what we had and how good it was, that we really did have this unconditional positive regard, like Gottman says, for one another, that we really did have care and consideration and have each other's backs. And we just were able to experience it more in the midst of those seasons. And it stuck, like, continued on to just have so much more security in the context of our relationship. Super thankful for that.
Oh, there's so much there.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, there's just so much there. And as you're talking, like, I want to just rewind just a bit when you were talking about recognizing that your role was not to save everybody else. I literally felt my breath catch when you said that, because I mean, that is something that I've lived myself, that same awareness. And you talked about, you're talking about the insecure attachment, or that all of that kind of breeds that codependent dynamic, which the goal is to become more interdependent, where that codependent dynamic is so out of balance, where you've got that rescuer, the saver. That was me for sure. And then you've got the rescuee, and that's not a negative term toward Luke or the people on the other side of that, because I know I would rescue people that didn't even need rescuing. I'm like, I'm there for it. I'm here to support you. That's my whole identity. And then I know we naturally pair up with people who are kind of happy to outsource sometimes, like the example you gave about, this is the last time I'm going to share with you. I know a lot of the people in my life who struggle with some of their own cognitive functioning, executive functioning, will happily outsource things to me if I'll take it. And so I did, because that was my identity. It's like, yes, but then there's the massive burnout that comes from that. And so but going back to what you said about, it's not for me to save everybody. That was such a scary, hard shift for me. And that was kind of me looking in the mirror too, in my own relationships, and not even at that point, my marriage was over, and that whole dynamic was so there in the marriage. But I saw it in my other relationships too, with my children, even like you were talking about a situation with a kiddo. We've been through a lot of trauma in my family, my household with my children. And oh my gosh, being able to step out into that place of, you've got to be responsible for you. I can't save you. And I know there's so many people who are listening to this who are going to resonate with that, and their own hearts are pounding right now just listening to this. I know that. And you can feel, I can see, Lauren, you're connecting with your core there. So huge. Luke, from your perspective, what was that like, seeing Lauren shift to not taking on as much?
At times it was scary. Understanding RSD has been so helpful, because there were so many times where she said, like, I'm not doing this. I'm not telling you this again. And it felt like, you're broken. There's something wrong with you, and I'm done trying to help you. And so it felt like she was giving up on me. And I had to do some internal work. A huge thing that she said that was so helpful is she would tell me, there's a difference between being hurtful and you being hurt. And for so long, I'm like, I didn't understand, because I'm like, no, this just hurts. Like, it hurts. What you're telling me hurts. But doing my own internal work and realizing what she's saying is true, and it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. That when I don't pursue her, it triggers her attachment. And when I leave her there, that's hurtful. What I heard is, I'm a failure as a husband and I keep on hurting you. And I'm like, but I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to pursue you. I don't know. And I just had to when she would share that with me, I had to be like, okay, that's true. I don't maybe understand it. Maybe I don't totally agree with it, but she's telling me this. And so I need to wrap my brain around it and believe it. And what can I do differently so that she's not left me? I might not feel like I'm avoiding something, but if it goes to my head, if there's a thought in my head of like, we feel disconnected, or she might feel like we're disconnected, I need to pursue her because her attachment is triggered, and I have to, and I want to love her this way. It was scary in another sense. If I felt very overwhelmed when she was like, I need you to do this, or I'm done reminding you to do this. There's parts of me that was like, I don't know how to remember this. So I had to get new resources, new tools. I had to use notes, calendars. And when she asked me to do something, rather than say, I'll do it in 10 minutes, I had to get up and do it right then because I knew I would forget in 10 minutes. And I had to stop lying to myself that I would remember. I was like, no, I have to accept I will not remember. And it'll be better for me to do it now and for it to be done with than for her to be frustrated with me or me feel like a failure or for her to have to remind me. Because I was like, I don't want her to have to, I don't want her, she does enough. And I was able to see like she does enough. I don't want to put another thing on her plate. Like I don't want to be just another child she has to take care of. And that doesn't mean that I don't struggle with things, but it's up to me to figure out how to support myself and resource myself and not for her to be responsible for that. There's times where she's like, and there's been times where she would ask me to go like pick up the kids or something and I'm at work and I would have a voice in my head like, doesn't she realize that I'm in the middle of something? And I had to remind myself like, but she's also in the middle of something. And I had to remind those parts like, she does this, this, and this. She wouldn't ask me if she didn't need me. And I have to trust her. But there was like demand avoidance coming in, transitioning out of things. It was like, there's parts of me that just were like, why would she do this to me? This is wrong. This is unfair. It's like, no, it's not. I want to be her partner. If she needs my help, she wouldn't ask for my help if she didn't really need it, or if she didn't. And with her chronic illness, that also has trained me in a sense of like, she pushes herself way past most people. Like when she had a headache and she's like, can you pick up the kids? It wasn't like, oh, I have a little headache. It's like, I've had a headache for probably 3 days. I'm finally telling you that I have a headache. Like, and so throughout our marriage, I also started just not questioning those things. That doesn't mean my RSD or demand avoidance wouldn't kick in, but I had to do a lot of internal self-regulation because it would be maybe a Saturday afternoon and I've been tired for a week and I'm like relaxing and she's like, hey, you need to go do this for me. And my body's like, no, like I'm overwhelmed. I had a plan of relaxing and I just had to tell myself like, okay, like now I'm just like, okay, that's my demand avoidance. That's okay. And now I'm going to go choose to do what she asked me because we are a partner. We're a team. Like I need to ask her to do some things and she needs to ask me to do some things.
And he's really great about when I see the demand avoidance come across his face by maybe a slight eye roll or a huff or
Never.
And I just name it. And I say like, that's what I'm seeing. Like, is that how you really feel? Because of course I don't want to feel like a burden or like he doesn't want to help. And he's like, sorry, I do have something coming up that wants to resist this demand. But I also know it's a completely legitimate request and I'm glad to do it. And like, that's all.
Yep.
We should move forward. It's so helpful. These words, these terms, this paradigm, it literally is life-saving when you can understand yourself and your partner better.
And even if I'm not glad to do it, I'm willing to do it.
Willing,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I'd be glad, but I'm willing to do it. And that, Luke, what you just described, that piece of self-awareness, well, for both of you really, because, Lauren, you go in the 3 days without sharing, you've got the headache, totally relatable. The overfunctioners of the world, the rescuers of the world, we just don't share what we're experiencing and we just take on way too much, which we're basically training other people how to respond to us and expect way more from us than we're even really capable of. And then we start burning out. We get resentful. We start getting critical. Why can't you this? Why can't you that? Why don't you just And then we become really judgy and shaming because, look at, I'm meeting all these needs for you. I'm anticipating your needs before you even have them. And why aren't you doing that for me? And then you've got Luke. Then on your side of things, you're struggling. That demand avoidance is your brain's like resource coordinator. Do I have the resources to do this? No, I don't. So I'm not. Why would she even ask me to do this? And
Yeah.
yet I love what you said about recognizing, okay, I don't really have the resources to do this, but I'm also hearing that that doesn't mean she does either. And sometimes as a team, we're going to take hits, as a team and as individuals. There are going to be moments when I don't have the resources, I don't have the bandwidth, but neither does she. And somebody's just going to have to dig in and deal with something. That self-awareness piece is so critical. And Luke, you even touched on the cognitive empathy, the theory of mind. I'm at work. Does she know I'm in the middle of something? Why would she even ask me to do this? Why would she ask me to go pick up the kids? But then you realizing, checking in and saying, okay, would my wife just be selfish like that? And then well, no, she wouldn't. If she's asking me to do something, she really needs me to do it. That is such an important place to get to for couples. Oh, we could talk about this all day long, but I want to be cognizant of your time. And I want to ask you, because, Luke, you are the therapist, trained therapist, and Lauren, you've been through, you're so trained and educated and also in trauma and the way our body. What do you guys have to say? Let's shift this toward a little bit more of the downside of things. What might you have to say to people who are listening or watching this and they're saying, you know what, I don't see these ingredients in my marriage, or I'm putting in all this effort, but my partner is just absolutely not willing or able to have that insight. I know that's not a clear cut, what do you do? There's no answer to that, but any thoughts or guidance that you have for folks?
A couple of things come up for me when somebody writes me, it kind of gives that scenario. I'll do a discovery call with them, and there's been several times where I'm like, whatever, it's usually the wife, to be honest, but whatever the partner that says, I'm doing all this work and just doesn't seem to be reciprocating, I'll offer individual counseling or individual counseling separately to see if I can help that partner understand what's going on, the other perspective, see if they can engage in those, get some resources so they can start engaging differently. I don't encourage marriage counseling in that situation where there's not that reciprocation or doesn't seem like they want to put the mutual effort in. There's definitely situations where it's might be best for a separation or try to separate, even talk about divorce. Sometimes it just isn't meant to be. And depending on the situation, you talk about this, and I something I share is there's not everybody agrees with maybe this perspective, but this is kind of what I've noticed is there's neurodivergent people who have abusive patterns, and then there's, and actually Gottman calls it characterological abuse and circumstantial abuse. So there's times and circumstances you can be abusive. I was abusive. I was dysregulated. I was upset. I was defensive, gaslit. Part of that is also understanding is our communication styles. I'm a very concrete thinker. So when I said something, I thought I meant this, but it was not communicating that. And so there might be some work that needs to be explored, that types of things. And then there's also characterological abuse where it's they're neurodivergent, but there's also a desire for power and control. And that is not a situation where we want that can necessarily be worked with or we even want to work with, because that's not safe. It's just going to be used to manipulate. So those are the kinds of things that come to my mind if there's been effort and there's just realized there's not the desire for insight. There's not the desire to listen, to reflect, to take responsibility. If they're willing to do counseling, great. Have them do it individual and see if they can access some of those resources. But until you see that, I don't recommend or even offer couples counseling, because it's those same dynamics end up happening as one overfunctions in the session and then then continues overfunctioning and takes more effort and intentionality, and it just cyclical and is really draining and traumatizing. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yeah,
what came to my mind.
it
Asked it.
100% did. And, I just second everything that you said. And I like the way you broke it down with the circumstantial and characterological, which is the John and Julie Gottman terminology and their categorization. And I think that, I talked in my last season of this podcast with Mona Kay, we talked about the timeline of our own marriages and how they evolved and devolved. And we both talk about how we became toxic. I became a toxic person. Characterologically, I'm not a toxic human being, but the circumstantial situation resulted in very toxic behaviors of my own, like you're talking about. I really want our listeners to think about what Luke's saying. And if you've listened to me much, you've heard me talk about it too. I call it capacity, willingness, and motivation. Those three pieces really have to be there for each individual. And I know a lot of people come to me who have realized that a partner is neurodivergent, or maybe usually sometimes it's they realize themselves that they themselves are neurodivergent. And it feels like, oh, this is the answer. This is the answer. Now we can move forward as a couple. But when only one partner is on board with the insight, the self-awareness, the reflection, the other one is, and sometimes they can come around to it, because sometimes at first it's like that label is like, hey, hold on, you're calling me broken or whatever. And like you said, that individual work is really critical to help that individual to see if they're even capable or interested. In some cases, that other partner doesn't even want to be involved in coaching or counseling. And I think it's important for people to know and to hear that sometimes there's such misalignment, the attunement's not there. Those ingredients are just not there. And one person in a relationship can't make it work by themselves. That's just a relationship is two people. It's two-way. So yeah, Lauren, do you want to add anything to all of that?
I just thought when you guys were talking about an analogy that maybe Luke could share quickly about the coasters, but just wanted to say, like, I think it's always important to say when you start to change, there can be this idea of therapeutic backlash where you're actually changing and becoming more healthy. And then your partner, the homeostasis is off in your partnership, and there can be negative real negative consequences to that if there's not a willingness and a readiness in them. And so just a reminder of, like, if you aren't sure if you're safe, that's always the main priority, is your physical safety. I stopped overfunctioning for Luke, and because of the person he is and the resources he did already have, he was able to be with himself in the midst of that feeling and the difficulty. Some of his clients report to him that it really feels like abandonment when their partner stopped pull away from the enmeshment, actually individuate, stop and feel totally left alone. And that triggers all kinds of stuff in them, right? And it could trigger anger and violence. It could trigger really serious stuff. So I think it's important to know if you do start to renegotiate what you're doing within the context of that relationship and your partner's not on board, you need some support as you do that, as you navigate that. Because that's a journey. Even if you're headed towards separation, that's still going to require mindfulness about how you're going about doing that so that you can stay safe and that your house doesn't become a war zone.
Yes, very. I don't even have anything to add to what you said there. That's
Absolutely
very well put. Luke, tell us the coaster analogy.
Yeah. Do you remember his name, Lauren? Because you're better
Dr.
at names.
Jake Porter.
Okay. So he uses the analogy. He uses it in betrayal trauma, but I think it works with any relational dynamics. Basically, he uses like a cup coaster. So there's a coaster, and the coaster represents being all into the relationship. There's trust, there's safety, there's communication, there's reciprocity, and that's where we want to be. But a lot of times in a relationship, there's usually one person on the coaster and the other one is off the coaster. And and that person's trying to pull them onto the coaster. But what we're talking about is might be a time where that person on the coaster needs to step off the coaster and heal and do their own work. And this other person needs to do their work, and they need to work and get on the coaster. The one that's been off the coaster needs to work and get on the coaster. And there's going to be a time where this other overfunctioner partner is going to stay off the coaster for a little bit and see if they are like legitimate, if they're consistent, if they really want to be there. And a lot of times in this situation, the underfunctioner gets on the coaster and says, I'm on the coaster. Why aren't you meeting me halfway? Or why aren't you on the coaster? And they get really upset. And so they get back off the coaster. But the idea is they need to stay on that coaster to build trust, allow that person to heal. And when they're ready and feel safe, then they get on the coaster. And so just that idea that I can't remember who it was, or Dr. Andrew Bauman, he used the idea of like a car accident. Like, what if the underfunctioner drive the car and they cause abuse, trauma, hurt? They're like, the other person's not going to want to get in their car right away. And they're like, I'm driving fine. I'm okay. Just get in the car. Like, no, I don't trust you. And there has to be that space that the person doesn't get back on the coaster or back in the car until they feel safe to do that. And the underfunctioner or the abusive partner needs to do their own work in the midst of that season where there's not safety, and just give them that space so that when they're ready, they feel safe, they can re-engage.
And that is actually a real scenario. That last one you just gave about the car, that's not just an analogy. That's a real scenario that happens so often with neurodiverse couples, where you've got someone who is driving in a way that feels very unsafe to the other partner. I mean, that's not even just that is such a, I'm glad you said that, because that just segued right into very real safety issues that are happening with neurodiverse couples, and how each person has, the overfunctioner has the responsibility to stay out of the car and honor their own fear, honor their own gut, telling them I don't feel safe, instead of getting in the car to protect the feelings of the driver. And then the driver has their work to do to say, I'm driving in a way that feels fine to me, but my partner, my kids even, are feeling terrified while they're in the car with me. And so we take that literal situation and apply it figuratively to other aspects in the relationship. And that's a great analogy. So I think that's a great place to kind of wind down here. And is there anything else that the two of you, either one of you, just any final parting words that you want to share with our listeners and viewers?
I just think as the neurotypical partner, for me, it's been actually really empowering to realize that acceptance goes a really long way. And it's not like some fluffy word. It is a gritty, like life-changing thing to accept the realities around you or in the people that you love and stop trying to change them. Mm-hmm. Now, we say that in light of knowing some things do need shifting, some things do need changing. And then also it's figuring out what things are just preferences in me. What things can I actually let go of that are actual relational needs that I release my partner from, and then actually feel more love towards them and less bitterness, because I'm not expecting this thing that's just not in their makeup. It's just not who they are. They love me in other ways. And Luke and I both do that with each other. We're both, love each other really well in some ways. And in other ways, like we're never going to find this perfect love in one person and in one relationship. So I just encourage both neurodivergent and neurotypical partners listening to this, if you are in a relationship where there's reciprocity, willingness. I like those three that you said, Jodi: willingness, motivation, and
capacity.
If those elements are there to varying degrees, then it's like, okay, how can I soften into what is? We really talk a lot about learning to live in reality. And this is really important for survivors and for people who have come from abusive situations, and also for people in neurodiverse relationships. learning to live in reality. How do I soften into this and accept it?
Mhm.
And that's not a one-day thing. That's not a 1 week. It's more cyclical. There's grief,
Mhm.
acceptance, and grief and acceptance. And one day you kind of wake up and it's just softer. It's not so edgy and so prickly and so awful and difficult. And you can finally like feel freed up to enjoy the goodness and beauty in life because you're not always consumed with the trying to change this thing. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and I would just add or on to what you're saying that acceptance is not the same thing as accommodation. Those are two different things. A lot of people are like they hear acceptance and they're hearing, well, I've just got to accommodate. No, because there are still those things that need to be changed, and safety is at the root of what you really have to look at needs to be changed, and then you look at those needs versus wishes and preferences. We're taping this right before Valentine's Day, so it's going to air after Valentine's Day. But I just did a webinar on YouTube, and I talk about that very thing. About I stay away from the word needs when I'm working with couples because so many needs are not really needs. It's really more, this is what I want. This is what I prefer. This is what I wish. This is what Hollywood's told me a relationship's supposed to be. And so, kind of going back to safety, acceptance, doing our own part, all of that. Luke, any final words of wisdom here?
Yeah. As Lauren was just talking, I was just that acceptance is key because as I've been able to accept my neurotype and capacity, I freed myself from unrealistic expectations, but also Lauren has freed me from unrealistic expectations. And there's just been so much more like freedom to love each other. And I also want to say, just because my capacity may be low, doesn't mean that there are times where I'm like, I push myself. So like, I still want to make sure that Lauren feels loved. And so if there's things that I'm doing or not doing that is communicating her being unloved, I still want to find ways to push myself or like resource myself so that she can feel loved. Being neurodivergent is an excuse that Lauren doesn't get loved the way that she needs to be loved. And within a safe, reciprocating relationship, as I do that, she also recognizes, oh, you need extra space. You need some downtime. And she gives that to me. So like having that, just accepting that and verbalizing it and having that open communication and dialogue is just so important so that I can learn how to love her well, even when I feel incapable or like capacity wise. But she also doesn't expect perfection. But she can still share with me. Like we had a conversation last week where there was a miss and she shared with me like I didn't feel loved. But she's also like, I know these are part of this is me, but I also want you to know this. And it was really helpful because she did it in a way that wasn't saying you're a bad person, but there's still, can you love me? I still need to be loved in these areas. And because of the language and understanding my RSD, my neurodivergence, she was able to communicate in a way that wasn't shameful and harmful, but was still able to get her needs met. And I was able to receive it and like, okay, because I missed this, or I'm not a bad person, but I need to find ways to be more intentional.
Yeah, I would just kind of summarize what you're saying is that when we choose to be in a relationship or in a marriage, we're choosing the well-being of our partner as much as our own. And in other words, we can't just choose a relationship because of how it benefits us. We have to also look at, if I'm choosing to be in this relationship, I'm also choosing your well-being as well. And I have some accountability there to make sure your well-being it matters, even if that means sometimes I have to make a sacrifice here and there. I think a lot of people end up in relationships and they're really, and I would say this happens on both sides sometimes, that they're really looking at how's this relationship benefiting me and making my, how am I getting my needs met, and less sometimes at making sure our partner's benefiting and their well-being is safe and just to that's what kind of comes to my mind when I'm hearing you talk there, Luke.
Well said.
Thank you. Well said to both of you too. This has been so great. I want to just reiterate to the folks listening that Luke and Lauren are also admins of the Facebook group that I've had for 4 or 5 years now. Just find us, search Neurodiverse Relationships. You'll find the group, and it's a great group of all neurotypes, all genders, and we have safe conversations in there, which we don't allow venting and bashing, and our members are able to talk amongst each other and get feedback and guidance. And there's a lot of really heavy conversations in there, but there's also a lot of just educational and lightheartedness, and it's a great place. So come on over and find us there. Thank you both so much for being on this podcast, and I'm going to be on yours here soon too, and I'm looking forward to that. Yes. So yeah, well, thank you both, and I'll be seeing you around, and we'll definitely put in the show notes how you can find Luke and Lauren, so you can go check out their website and their services as well. So thanks, guys, and I hope you have a great evening. It's time for you to go to bed. I'm just starting my day here.
It's that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi.
Thanks so much. That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time.